council. We have a special meeting tonight in which we will discuss the proposed Comcast renewal agreement and the ordinance which is part of the program to get that Comcast renewal agreement approved as part of the business. What we would like to do tonight is to hear from people who are interested about this renewal contract, if there are comments that they may have. We will be taking as much information as we can tonight. We will also do two other things. One of them which will be to form a drafting committee that will draft recommendations. And then we will set a meeting for which that report will come back so that we will have another public meeting to look at and review the recommendations of the drafting committee. I would like, the first person I would like to call is the representative from Comcast to explain to us why he believes that the proposed agreement as presented to this committee should be approved, and any other questions that he may have or any other comments that he may have.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this meeting here. This franchise has been
Excuse me, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Kevin Broadhurst, and I'm the Senior Director of Government Affairs for Comcast in Delaware County, Chester County, and Newcastle County. So here tonight to answer any questions, discuss the cable franchise that we've been negotiating for probably about 4 years or so to renew the cable agreement that allows Comcast to operate in the township, to service our customers, and to provide the PEG support that Radnor has come to rely on. We feel like this is an incredibly generous franchise. It secures the financial future of the public educational government access channels in Radnor for 15 years and protects the interests of Radnor, protects the investment from Comcast, and feel like this franchise is something that should be approved by the township.
Okay. If you will be gracious enough to wait, we may have some questions for you.
I'd be happy to.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Broadhurst. I'd next like to call on George Strimmel, who is here from Radnor Studio 21. George, would you?
I am here. My name is George Strimmel. I live at 47 Luella Court. I am a resident of Radnor Township. I come here perhaps wearing a number of hats, not the least of which is being the general manager of Radnor Studio 21. But I also am the president of the Historical Society. I'm on the board of the Senior Center. I happen to be the past president of the library. I am much involved with the community and want that which is best for our community and to make it special. We've been operating under a contract that was extended, as noted by the gentleman from Comcast, that expired but has been basically continued month to month, year to year, and for the most part has been lived up to, certainly on the financial end of it. And if we need help, it has been given to us on the technical support. If we have problems, just call somebody and they'll come and help fix it. This doesn't include the production equipment, but certainly it includes the distribution equipment. I think one of the most interesting things that needs to be noted here is George, how we got to where we are.
Just a second.
Yes, please.
I'd hate to cut you off in midstream. You talked about production equipment, and then you talked about distribution equipment.
Correct.
Would you, for the sake of the audience, would you distinguish those two so people understand what the significance of those two items?
Production equipment, of course, is that which creates the program. It's what people think of with the lights, camera, and action end of it. In our case, that is all then devolves down to become a computer file. Now what do we do with that computer file? That goes into the playback equipment, which is basically a distribution center, which then distributes both to Comcast and to Verizon. That goes out on a fiber link down to wherever they then send it back to, in Comcast's case, into the political boundaries of this. That includes a computer, a couple of computers that serve as the server. It also includes all of our storage. We have now about 9 terabytes of storage, and we have all of the other things that make it happen. So that when you go on, we have a schedule that goes out, it's online, people see that schedule, and they expect that the 8 o'clock show will be there at 8 o'clock, and that's what we're doing on the playback. So we have distribution, playback, and we have production. The two are linked, but unless it's election night or something, we're not going live on the air.
Okay. So basically, whatever's produced in the studio, they've helped you distribute it, and that's where the help has come, but not on the production
We turn it
side.
over to Comcast and also to Verizon, actually in the racks.
Right.
That's where they
but-
get what we're sending.
But they have not helped on the production side.
Not recently. There was some, if you really want to go back according to the original agreement, that was something that was supposed to be done quarterly. It hasn't been done for many, many quarters, where there was an inspection and then a report on the state of what we have. Some months, perhaps you can remember, I don't know how many months ago, we did, or years even now, that we upgraded the equipment we had to the best of standard definition. Now, standard definition equipment can no longer be purchased, but that was the best that there was. It was a joint effort. They supplied and we supplied. And
Well,
that
we-
is the equipment you now see on the air.
Excuse me. When they supplied, we supplied, what are you talking about? The
We
money to buy
paid
it?
for some. We paid
Right.
for one of the cameras.
Okay. And,
There were 2 cameras that were upgraded or replaced, and I believe you paid for 1 or 2, but what? Okay, they paid for 2 and we paid for 1.
okay. But they did not pay for all 3.
What's that?
They did not pay for all 3?
No.
Okay.
So that's where we are today, and lights and all the rest, audio, video. All of the playback equipment, we originally paid for
Okay.
to
I'm
replace that which was there.
Sorry to take you off track, but I thought it was important.
It isn't at
to-
all off track. It brings me to how did we come to be? And I, being an old history type, think it's important that people know. If you would be good enough to distribute this. This is, I won't give it all to you, I think it's all there, but in fact, I think I gave you my copy. But this happens to be a story of how Radnor Studio 21 came to be and how we are in the place we are in today. Now, if you'd be good enough to give me back one of those, Jim, so I could actually read it. I'm ever generous. In any states, we really came into existence in 1982 when Storr, the original franchisor here in Radnor Township, put the station on the air. They were broadcasters. They were, I used to run a cable company in the 80s and ran across them as they were looking for franchises in New Jersey. In any case, they won that. They won ourselves, I believe Haverford and Marple in this immediate area. They didn't last that long. 84, a consortium of Comcast and Adelphia moved to purchase all of Storr Communications' cable operations. They still went into the broadcasting. In any case, it was divided up and Adelphia took this over. Whether there was any long-term agreement, which was not unknown in the cable industry, for either party to take control of that which the other one had, I don't know, although that did eventually occur. What happened simply was that they operated, that is Adelphia, according to the agreement that was originally made. Well, then they did less and less and less, and more and more volunteers were running what 21 was. 21 was an obligation that was carried on. When Comcast came Adelphia then said, look, we don't really want to be in this business anymore. What we would like to do is monetize it. We'll give you the money we're spending, and you can go do it with perhaps a private, standalone nonprofit. That occurred. That occurred in late '99. At the same time, Adelphia was divesting themselves to Comcast. Comcast had to come before this body and the township to take over the franchise. That's just part of the law. Part of that agreement was we will continue to do what Adelphia has agreed to do. So finally, as Comcast is taking over and Adelphia is leaving, a nonprofit is organized, approved by this body and the township, called Radnor Studio 21. This is now the people coming forward. In that, it continued with that agreement. That agreement required the franchisor, the franchisee, well, anyway, it required both Adelphia and then Comcast to provide the facilities and a certain amount of dollars and cents that they had been paying for personnel, some $40,000 to begin with for that, and then paying all the rent. That is still the case. Somewhere along the line, they decided they'd like to get out of another obligation, that is Comcast, get out of another obligation, and that obligation was providing an office in Radnor Township. That was allowed, again, with the approval of this organization and a rewriting of the franchise agreement, in return for which they gave to Radnor Studio 21 that particular space and continuing to pay it. That's where we are today. My guess is that that is costing Comcast approximately $60,000, $70,000 a year for all maintenance of all of that. It doesn't include any of the equipment. We're talking about that. Then the cash goes on. It was tied to some sort of a formula to the tune of now of about $50-some thousand a year. And that is Comcast where they are today. That is in greater detail in that which I gave.
Can I ask you a couple of questions? You threw out the figure of 60,000. That does not include the rent which they pay on the space.
Oh, no, that does include this. They pay $60,000 a year a rent on the space.
Plus there's a monetary amount
over and above that. And
Right.
there's also the cost of any utilities.
Right, and so the sum total is over $100,000.
Well, maybe Mr. Broadhurst could better speak to that than I can. I don't know because I don't see the bills. I do know what the rent is, and I do know that includes certain in-kind and services.
Yeah, okay. They make a cash contribution to the studio.
In addition, over and above.
Right. So you take the rent, and then you add the cash contribution. That gets you a number.
Yes.
All right. And then you have the utilities. That's,
No, the utilities are in there.
well.
We don't have any
is part-
utilities.
No, but the utilities are picked up by Comcast under
Correct.
the agreement.
Correct.
So I'm trying to get
Sure.
clear in my mind.
I could give you an exact number if I was
Let me
privy to it.
just let me go through it with you and see if we can get this pieced out so we understand it. To monetize the programming obligation, which they had, which was essentially the cost of the person running the studio to provide the programming. That person was the one who assisted the volunteer group to produce. They ran the studio, so it was essentially to enable the programming. They originally was agreed by Adelphia for a sum of some $48,000, and added to that every year was an increase, which was based upon the increase of the base rate that they were charging their customers. It would increase.
Where such occurred.
Right, where such occurred. That amount is now somewhere just slightly north of $60,000.
50, maybe mid-50s.
It's in that range. Plus then is the obligation to pay for the rent, which is somewhere in, give or take, $50,000, plus utilities on that, plus telephone, internet, plus to keep the equipment up to date and to repair the equipment when needed. It's all part of that franchise agreement.
Yes.
Okay. So we don't have a definite sum in front of us, but it certainly can be calculated.
Correct.
But those are the essential elements of it. So one element was programming, the other element was capital and capital needs and equipment.
And correct, the operations, and that
Right.
$40,000 to $43,000 when I came in the door
Yeah.
was to pay not only for the salary, but also for any of the incidentals,
Right.
in those days, tape, et cetera.
Right, okay. I think we have a picture of that. One of the things I think that may be helpful here is people, I think, probably need a little better understanding of what PEG does, what programming is provided. Can you tell us a little bit more about what happens on Straddle 21? What is the services that are provided in terms of programming? Now, before you get there, let me direct you a little bit more in terms of my question. Who is allowed to come in and program? And what are restrictions, if any, on their being broadcast? Is it open to everybody in the township? How does that work in that general sense? And then could you give us some idea of the programming that goes on?
We ourselves are under obligation due to our contract with both cable companies to make sure that the programming is of a certain quality, that we don't have copyright infringement, that we don't have slander or libel and defamation and a lot of other things. All that they make sure, in addition to those things, they want us to indemnify them if anyone comes. So we require every person who produces a program to sign an indemnification, though that they agree to all of those things. We have had problems with people that didn't want to sign them, but for the most part, that is absolutely required. In addition, if they are not, let's say they're underage, then that person must have a family member. It is open to everyone in Radnor Township who lives here or is a taxpayer here. They don't necessarily have to live here to do that, but they have to be a part of the community. Those people then must give some example of their own prowess in the ability to take a camera out. We train people to do that, or do studio experience. For the most part, our staff, which is the 3 people, including myself, provide all of the support for production. We don't require that you come in there and you bring in 5 people to push cameras, et cetera, et cetera. That was the case once upon a time. But in this day and age, this YouTube day and age, that's really no longer necessary. So people come in. If you're not from around here, it is required that you have somebody from Radnor Township to vouch for you.
Okay. In addition to the programming that's open to the township, do you provide any other services to the township in terms of what the studio does, such as school children?
Oh, well, we're in the middle, as anyone could tell you, of the walk through Wayne that occurs through these number of weeks. And so we have had batteries of kids. Yesterday we had 2 groups come in, and they get to see, number one, the best of all, they get to see themselves on television. They learn not to eat the microphone. They learn they're 4th graders. They're full of vim and vigor. And that's what we do. We're there for the community. That's what we're trying to do, build community here. I spoke of all the organizations I'm involved with, all of whom are involved with Radnor Studio 21.
So you provide educational services in one sense to
We also have interns. We welcome interns to come in, and we try to teach them, usually on a one-to-one basis, all the intricacies. The most interesting thing these days is not necessarily camera work, it's editing. Everybody wants to know, how do you make Final Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere or whatever it is work?
So, do you have any examples of some of the work that's done?
Well, first, before I get to it, I will note that our prime time started at 6 o'clock tonight and will go right through midnight. Everything we do is then played in every day part, which means four times a day the programs are seen. So we do 42 hours of original programming every week, original either created by us or gathered elsewhere, and then all of that is repeated. What do we do? Well, to quote the epitaph on Christopher Wren's tomb there in St. Paul's, if you seek my monument, look around me. And the best way to see what we do is to get some taste for that, at least at Radnor Studio 21. And it is not purely by chance that I happen to have a little 4-minute DVD that I'm going to play for you right now, if that's permissible.
Thank you.
Okay, Jim, you can cue it up, and it will be coming up right there where it says DVD, and our little bouncing ball will take you through a quick run there. No, it's only on the...
Hello, and welcome to the Entrepreneurs Network. I'm Rick Anthony.
Good evening, and top of the evening to you. Dr. Packnell.
Hi, I'm Donna, and welcome to Sage on Stage. Sage Seasoned Activities for Greater Enrichment is an innovative program sponsored by the Wayne Senior Center, the Center with Outdoors.
Welcome to Bonnie's Beat. This is your host, Bonnie Squires. We're coming to you from Radnor Studio 21 in beautiful downtown Wayne.
SEPTA maintains and operates nearly 300 miles of commuter rail, over 300 miles of light rail. We have about 30 miles of electric trolleybus, over 20 miles of heavy rail system. All our substations, all our switches are controlled remotely from a central control point.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, or you can take a break.
By wind it down to 1 minute here. Oh boy, this kid's and he's got speed. There's Peter. He gets it across. Oh, fingertip saved by Wesley Dixon.
The opening reception for the 5 Bs: birds, bees, butterflies, bats, and bugs.
I want to thank Jennifer again for being our sparkling guest. I want to thank each of you for spending the time with us today and listening. I hope that this knowledge will help you and others that you interact with.
Thank you, John.
It was a pleasure to have you. It was an honor for me to have you on. With Barbara Mancini, this is John Ricciuti, Radnor Studio 21 in Wayne, Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today and living it up, making life juicy.
Thanks very much for joining us. Well, there are some examples of the things we do, and added with so much more is 168 hours. And remember, even though we are serving just a reasonably small number of places, the cost of operating is essentially the same whether you serve one person or 1 million people. It has to be put together, and you have to do 168 hours, and that's what we do.
Talking about people you serve, can you tell us where this signal from Radnor Studio 21 is seen?
Well, actually, we're seeing it now with extensions. We're seen on Comcast here in Radnor Township. We are talking to the people in Lower Merion about feeding a program service to them also, but that's not where we are right at the moment. We are extended by Verizon, who then takes our signal all over. I mean, out down to Glen Mills and the Delaware border, down to the City Ave and Lower Merion, out to East Bradford, up into Phoenixville, Collegeville. We cross into multiple counties, 3 counties right now.
Thank you. Does any member of the committee have any questions for George?
Well, since you are gathering information, I do have a few more things to mention, if I may. One is certainly that we're not unaware of what's happening down in Philadelphia. And that may be something well worth looking at and following and understanding. There's been a 500 and some page document prepared by the city with the city's funds to see what people are really looking for as Comcast renews 4 different franchises in that city immediately near us here. But some things they have accomplished that I would certainly like to see us accomplish. One is the whole matter of high definition. It's got to be faced. It can't be forever sort of being over there. In Philadelphia, the Philly CAM, which is their public access operation, has been given a high definition channel. There is no excuse that we couldn't have the same thing since, as I said, it doesn't matter how many people you're serving. They may be a bigger city, but their capacity is essentially the same. Another thing that's very important is the electronic program guide. That too has been provided in Philadelphia. That is where you go on and you see, well, what's playing. This is not a problem for us, for we are 2 weeks ahead in our programming schedule at all times. That's the deadline to get into the newspapers. So it's a matter of just getting that, and it has been provided through Comcast in those cases. We also noted that there are some things that are coming up that need to be discussed. One is the whole matter, well, what happens, do you stay on 21? We have stayed on 21 since 1982 and would not like to move. Obviously, a good argument could be made, but if you look at the suggested presentation in front of you, a $2,500, whatever you want to call it, is supposed to cover that while you go try to redo your thing when you're called Radnor Studio 21. That too should be addressed. We know that in some places, Holyoke, Mass. Is a good example where monies are being given to run all of PEG, and that's in a township that a 10-year contract received $603,000 in capital, not allowed to be passed through. Remember, in many of the cases, you can pass through the costs. That is part of the contract, and I do have this here to share with this group. It is not passed through to the subscribers, but the usual 5%, et cetera, is passed through. Another thing is the idea of how different we are. We started out, and you see the history in front of you, as being monetized of an existing obligation. And that's where we stand today. And for that reason, we've never been a pay-to-play operation. Most, I won't say every one of the access operations, public access operations in this country, require you to become a member and pay money in order to be on the air. Not only do you have to show a certain amount of skill, you have to pay. We do not pay to play. We never have, and I hope we never will. So we try to create something that is a benefit to every subscriber who, at least on the 5% level, is paying some fee. Everybody should. Whether they come to us or not, we'll go to them with programs we think are of value. And years ago, we did a study with Eastern University, who was kind enough to do it for us, a telephone coincidental, finding that about 50% of all the people were well familiar with us and watched us. So those are some of the state of where we stand today.
George, looking at the montage, that programming, could you explain the SEPTA trains and how they get to be there?
Well, the SEPTA train was a documentary. We put together some money, a few $1,000s, and with volunteers and friends and people who had been interns with us, we put that whole thing together. It's 39 minutes long. It has recently won a national award, as a matter of fact, and maybe more yet to come. And it's just, how does SEPTA operate? How do those trains appear on what you hope is time? How do all those things, okay, in any case, all those services, whether they're the bus, whether they're the high-speed line, et cetera, et cetera. And we got volunteers to do all the original music. They're all done by local musicians, local for southeastern Pennsylvania. They all volunteered and gave us all of this. SEPTA opened the doors and let us do the production.
So this was an original piece, original documentary
Everything
piece.
in it is originally shot by Radnor Studio 21, and it all belongs to Radnor Studio 21.
And so is it your plan to do more original programming
Well, there's
of this type?
two immediately we're working on. Now that I'm much involved with the Historical Society, we want to do one on Radnor. We had done one years ago on how the train came to Wayne, if that shows a certain leaning in my direction. In any case, and we want to do one about Radnor, and we're working on that one now. And SEPTA has come back to us and said, the railroad is yours. You can do one on regional rail anytime you want, and you can have whatever you want to do it. And we do a lot of things. For instance, you saw Nurse Nancy there at the end. Dr. Nancy RN is about 85 shows that were done on the matter of health care with top people from Penn and from Drexel and from Temple and indeed from many other places. It is now on the air in Chicago, oddly enough. Things are being picked up around the world, or at least around the states, of things we do. And we'll hope we are sort of like that station on a mountain, if you will.
So the message from Radnor gets taken out to other town. The message from Radnor gets taken out to other communities around the area and.
Absolutely. As I said, we recently
nation.
won a national, what's called a Telly Award, and we may be getting more of those. And we are in the run for Emmys.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Stroll, can
Yes.
you, and I will ask Mr. Broadhurst this too, can you tell me what additional requirements there are? There's obviously high-definition cameras and that sort of stuff, but in terms of bandwidth, what additional requirements are there to take a channel to high definition?
Well, it could use up about 4 times what a standard def uses in the way of bandwidth, and it really is all about that. That's a limited commodity, at least in the traditional Comcast. Now, Comcast, as we know, is doing fiber to the home in Atlanta, so they're really following in the FiOS step, which has more bandwidth available. And of course, online, too.
But
And
now,
Bruce, I'm sorry to interrupt, could I like your line of questioning, and I was hoping, would you mind just taking some actions for us? Because I also have some questions for Comcast. And instead of us, if you wouldn't mind, I mean, we'll write them down and then ask you to get back to us. Do you have any problem with that? Okay, so that would be question one, right? What additional bandwidth would be required to take R21? That's correct.
Technical amount of bandwidth.
And is that an issue with your current I'm an engineer, so I understand. So you got the question, so just come back to us with an answer. Thank you. Okay.
Now, my recollection is that when...
What was that?
My recollection is that when Radnor Studio 21 first began operation, and for a considerable number of years, you went out as an analog channel and not as a digital channel.
Yes.
And that required, if my recollection is correct, and I'm not an engineer, but I believe analog channels required about 6 times as much as a digital channel.
They're space hogs, but into that space, cable companies, for their own reasons, have shoved all the programming, so now you have 300 channels or whatever it is. They are, in the case, obviously, of the fiber, you don't have quite the restrictions, but with...
To follow up on Bruce's question, what you basically said is where we had an analog channel, we now have 6 channels, so they have made available 6 times the amount of programming that they used to have available on the analog.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 6 times more opportunity for a broadcaster to get their programming on the air.
In theory, most assuredly, but I am not a gatekeeper.
Okay.
Yes, I understand.
They are a
that.
gatekeeper.
Go ahead, sorry, Bruce.
Bruce, do you mind? I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have a couple comments and questions. So my understanding of PEG and the PEG part of what the dollars that you support both George and Radnor 21 as well as Radnor Township and what we're doing right now, which is being broadcast live, right? So it's really not one channel, it's multiple channels are supported by the PEG.
PEG encompasses 3 elements: public access, educational channel, which Joan is here representing, and the government channel, which Jim represents, and we're going to ask both of them to speak tonight also.
So do they each get funding as well?
No. The only funding, the funding that comes into the township to support the PEG channel comes through the grant or the payment that we receive as a township from Verizon. So Verizon pays a percentage fee for PEG for programming or whatever other needs they may have. 20% of that is allocated to the township. That's one of the weaknesses, I think, in the ordinance, but that's another story. So at this stage of the game, township gets a portion of the PEG grant, if we want to use that term, from Verizon. But there's none of the money which Comcast is now providing for the PEG channels that goes outside of Channel 21.
Yep, so that's, and I apologize, I'm going to have to leave a little bit early tonight, but just to get my questions out. So could you also tell us, and you don't need to tonight, but could you also take an action to tell us how much of the PEG percent that you're allocating to Radnor is directly billed to Radnor consumers? And do you plan to pass it through with the new contract? So you would plan to pass 100% of that through with the new. Well, that was a question for Verizon that I'm asking, but so the point is that beginning with the new contract, you will pass 100% through. Okay. So, and so whatever we negotiate with you, really, in the end, we're negotiating what I would call I would like to say a quiet tax to our residents, right? Because we're just so I just think from being fiscally conservative, we just need to be careful that what we decide to do from a contractual standpoint, we understand where those dollars go.
That's correct, and Verizon does pass it through.
So Verizon.
One of the questions I have is an amendment to your question for Mr. Broadhurst, is if your PEG payment is a fixed sum, I'd like you to describe the mechanics by which you calculate how much everyone gets billed.
George, would you concede the mic for a moment?
What's that?
Would you concede the mic for a moment?
Oh, yes, of course.
Right, so the fixed amount, this is $125,000 we've negotiated, will be basically divided by the number of customers we have in Radnor Township and then passed through on a monthly basis. We have not passed through the costs all the years we've been providing the very generous support to Radnor. That's not been passed through. Going forward, it will be. It's always been our right to do that. We just haven't done it. But going forward,
but you do plan to do it.
Yeah. Yes, we do.
So, yeah. Thank you. That's what that
would it not be easier for you, from an accounting point of view, to do that on a percentage of revenue basis rather than a fixed?
No, the position is that we've negotiated the fixed amount, and that's what we're going to stick with. I'm not an accountant, so I can't tell you which one is easier. It's just not my expertise. But that's our position is that it's the fixed grant is what we've decided on.
And just from from a government, I think you're going down the same line of questioning I am. Now that it's being passed through, I think we just need to understand how that fixed amount compares to a percentage amount. Let me finish.
Sure.
Let me finish. But from a governmental perspective, I think we need to be careful that we don't give market advantage to one company versus another by having one contract that's on a percentage basis that would obviously fluctuate accordingly when customers either leave or come versus a fixed one that doesn't. So if I'm a Comcast customer, which by the way I am.
Thank you very much.
But if you lose market share,
yeah,
and you charge you give me it's $100,000, well all of a sudden my bill every month from Comcast goes from $5 to $8, right? So while as a percentage basis, it's more equitable. So that's my personal opinion, and it also allows us governmentally to ensure that we are properly not setting the stage to get one company an unfair advantage over the other.
And also, Verizon is not our only competitor. I mean, we have a lot of different competitors, whether it be satellite companies, the advent of online video. Many people are not even subscribing to the traditional cable TV package. So the industry, the world, technology has changed so much and will only continue to change. So it's not just a Verizon versus Comcast issue anymore. So there's many different competitors that don't pay any franchise fees.
Well, I agree. That's, to be honest with you, that's one of the main reasons why I'm such a strong proponent to a percentage-based fee. And the reason is because I have a 23-year-old daughter who gets everything online, right? She goes to Comcast, she has her $40 drop, and then she gets Netflix and everything else. She has no service with you at all, but she's watching programming. And that really is the millennials, that's what everyone's doing. So
you're right.
What you have proposed for the PEG grant, does that remain fixed? Is it escalated? Can it de-escalate? What's it tied to?
It's a fixed cost right now. So you'd have a fixed cost for 15 years of $125,000, no matter if we lose subscribers or gain subscribers. And the video marketplace is a mature market. I mean, we're fighting every day for customers because it's just so competitive. So even if we lose customers, you still get the $125,000.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, one other thing that I'd like you to address is the lead time which would be necessary to put Mr. Strimmel's program schedule onto the electronic programming guide.
Yeah, he had mentioned Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is a different situation. Every franchise is different. I mean, cities are much different than suburbs, obviously. So each franchise is going to be different. The Philadelphia franchise is one system. So you can probably, I don't know for certain if what he said is that they're putting every hourly program on the guide. I don't know that. I don't handle Philadelphia. But I know other towns have asked for that. And what I thought was a relatively easy request actually turns out not to be, because you're a part of Delaware County. So the cable system provides service to not just Radnor, but to many other towns in Delaware County. So to do that, it would have to override all the other channels that are on 21. So that's why the program, and this is a third-party company that does this, by the way. So we contract out with a company that provides the channel guide, and they said that that's not something that can be done on a town-by-town basis because of how small it is.
But you already override Channel 21 in other townships, isn't that correct?
What do you mean by override?
In other words, if I lived in...
No, Radnor 221 is not on the air in other towns, right?
Exactly. If I lived in Haverford or Swarthmore,
you're right.
Would there be anything on Channel 21?
You know, I don't know. It wouldn't be Studio 21, but there could be other programming on there.
I think what he's saying is that, like, if I remember right, it says, like, public access.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if you're in Swarthmore, that's your public access, just like we just happen to be parochial.
No, I'm not sure of that.
And 21
that's what he's saying.
And 21 is unique. Most, well, there's, public access is unique, I should say, but and mostly the towns in Delaware County have channel 10 or 11, and the 10 might be government, 11 might be educational. So because of that, it'll just say government access programming or educational access program. It doesn't say, you know, the Ridley football game was on at 7 p.m. because of that.
That's not my question. My question is, in other towns, what is carried on Channel 21 in other townships? Would you? But
it doesn't. This is we're talking about Radnor Township.
I understand that.
That would be a good action. Yeah.
But my question is, if you can put something on Channel 21 in Radnor and nowhere else, and you can put something else on in Haverford, I don't see why you can't customize
How about we do this?
the electronic programming guide for both Radnor and Haverford.
Because you're talking about two different things. We're using a third-party company to do the programming guide, and so that's the contract that they tell us that we can't do that on a localized basis. So what you're talking about is different than what a programming guide is. So if you want to get I can provide the contact for the programming guide. I have no problem if you wanted to put your information out on the guide. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to Comcast. It's just not technically feasible. So that's why, that's the answer.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay.
I have a comment because unfortunately I have to. So, the comment I'll make is that, first of all, George, I want to just shout out to George. His guys did a great job. I had a Cub Scout or a Boy Scout troop up at Valley Forge, and they brought me a producer, and we taught 11 boys how to use cameras, and we're on the air right now, right, George? And it really was a neat experience, so thank you for that. But having said that, if in fact we're going to a fee-based system where they're going to charge the consumer, so PEG is completely charged to the consumer, I really think that we need to take a hard look at Radnor 21 as far as their location in the future, because we have a large facility here, and I can just tell you from being on a couple boards, and I don't know, John, if you want to weigh in, but I know we have problems with other boards where they don't get access to this room because, they're doing a SWAT thing. So we're down in the room downstairs that doesn't have a public access TV, and I think there's a need here within the building maybe for a second small studio that would provide an ability for smaller boards to meet, as well as doing all the great things George does. And I think it would, really help us in further integrating the PEG across at least, Jim's stuff and George's stuff, and, the township thing or the school thing we'd have to think about.
Just as a matter of history, this building was not able to handle some of the hearings that were held on the charter review. Radnor Studio 21 on 2 or 3 occasions made the studio open, and it was able to provide those meetings to the public in the location in which it was. So there's some pros and cons about what you're talking about, which can obviously be talked about later, but that's not the subject of this particular hearing, but it's something that can be considered. I would like, thank you,
Okay.
Kevin.
Thank you.
No, I'll flip a coin. Who would like to go first? Jim or Joan, would you like to comment about the needs for the school board?
Sure. I'd be happy to. So I don't have a program to show, but I can tell you a little bit about our programming at Radnor High School. It really is a laboratory for students, and it's a club that participates and creates the programs at this time. There's a monthly news program that covers everything in the district, from information about the high school to the district in general. Right now, there's information on about new laws for volunteers, where everyone needs to get fingerprinted. So there's information for parents. The students have, besides their monthly news program, there is Televenti, which is a creative expression program where students are very artistic in some of the work that they create. There are videos that for special purposes, certainly LM Week, welcoming the freshmen, having an orientation. And then we also broadcast specific events for the school district, like the father-daughter dance that took place at Radnor Elementary School. We also have some specialty programs. One of the Televenti events or episodes included a cooking show from one student who had interest in that area. What we are doing right now is building up the courses that we're very excited about. So we have a first level video production course, because we'd really like to move from the club concept to really integrating it in the curriculum. So we have a video production 1 that ran this year, and we're really interested to move to video production 2. However, our control room has not had an upgrade in over 15 years of anything. So we're really trying to work on that right now, and I had, a request I have is for a small grant to help with the upgrade of the control room, which I shared with Mr. Broadhurst. The equipment is very old. We're trying to really get students interested and certainly on a career path, even something that they would pursue in college, and to do that, we really need some updated equipment. They also are using Final Cut for post-production, but on some very old machines. But it's really, the computers we have covered, we're going to add a couple more, but it's really the control room upgrade that we need. Our TV studio is staffed by one person, a TV studio specialist. We used to have an aide that would assist students with projects, but not anymore. It's really a place where students drop in, and beyond the club and beyond the class, students come to do class projects. They don't necessarily get aired as part of programming, and we really want to build up our programming online. But student projects for individual classes, like social studies or English or science. So they drop into the TV studio to work on their productions for those classes as well. We also are in need of an additional cable box for the middle school. When the signal went digital, we lost TV in our classrooms. And Comcast has provided us with one box per school, so we have one location that gets the digital signal. We do have video distribution at the middle school, and with an additional cable box, we can really distribute more channels there. So that we are getting. We are going to work that out. That should be delivered next week. Our other need for the school district is for the broadcast, live broadcast of our school board committee meetings. So we hold our school board meetings here in this room, and they're broadcast from here. But our board committee meetings, whether it's finance or curriculum or government relations, all take place in the administration building in the ground floor. We don't have a live feed from there. Our feed is from the high school. The meetings take place in the administration building. So we could really use a connection from the administration building to be able to show that programming live. What happens now is, people will come where they can, so when we have board meetings here, people can call in, they can email in questions, they can't see what's happening live at the committee meetings, and those are the ones that focus on individual issues on the committee agenda.
Joan, would you mind sending to the committee a summary of what you just told us, and then supply any additional information, including, estimates of costs and so on, for what you think your program needs are going out?
Certainly, I'd be happy to.
Thank you. You had said that you needed to leave, so I wanted to do two things before we bring Jim on. I just don't know how much time you have, so. Okay.
I've got 30 Boy Scouts waiting.
Okay. That's a hard thing to wait for.
One's here, which is a good news.
Two things. One, we need to set another meeting to take, first place, we'll need to create a report and recommendations. So I'd like to pull a committee together to do that. Bruce, would you be willing to work on that committee, on the drafting and report?
Yeah.
Okay. Joe?
I would be happy to. I just have a caution that some of my time over the next month is going to be limited.
We understand. And in light of that limited time, we want to have the next meeting in 2 to 3 weeks. I'm going away the end of this month, so I would say somewhere between the 2nd and the 9th, or.
I thought Jim had scheduled another meeting.
No, let's find it. Let's see what his I thought Jim.
Yeah, I think June 2nd is what I saw.
What?
June 2nd. Kara was going on.
Yeah, I think that we had scheduled a meeting.
I'm trying to remember. I don't remember what that
June 2nd.
date was.
June 2nd.
June 2nd?
That's what the audience tells us. I'll buy it.
No, but
Comcast is telling us that. Comcast is telling us that. It has to be right.
Okay. June 2nd. Okay. All right, so that meets with your busy schedule? Your complicated schedule? Okay.
fine.
So we'll have the next meeting June 2nd, and I will communicate with my two partners here to put recommendations together, and we'll bring those to the board, and we'll discuss them then and make any changes, additions, whatever, to the recommendations. Recommendations will then go to the township commissioners for their input. Okay. Jim, are you all right?
Sir, alarm was going off, sorry.
Okay. Our next meeting we scheduled for June 2nd, is that correct?
Sir, what date was that?
June 2nd?
I think I tentatively held that for you.
Okay, please, make
But I'll
that
check.
permanent. And now, if you would you tell us about the government channel and what your needs are?
I don't really have a report for you.
You can
Oh,
take
sure.
it. And I saw that you had a,
Excuse me. That's just, we have a capital budget that I prepare for the finance department every year, and an operational budget. I extended it out to 15 years, just as a example, so you could see what production equipment we use or request every year. Of course, that's not necessarily true of if it says need a new laptop. If the laptop isn't broken, knock on wood, you don't need to fix it. So I just push it off again to the next year until something is needed. Most of all the equipment in this room here is 7 to 8 years old. Unfortunately, there are a few things that are breaking every now and then here. I just had a piece, that's why you can't see anything on your monitors there. $1,500 piece broke, so I had to, it wasn't in the budget, but I popped that in there and went from there. The government access channel, I'll probably say 90% of it is for these public meetings, boards and commissions. We unlike a lot of other townships, We actually broadcast every board and commission, just about every board and commission. There's a couple of smaller ones that don't, or a few that don't meet regularly, but we do broadcast those. We do a monthly program, Radnor 411, which basically every department gives an update of what's going on in the department. We do Radnor Health Matters every now and then with the Board of Health. And then I'm trying to get a Radnor 911, just a police department monthly video going as well too. And then there's just a few special programs every now and then. We just did a thing for the Citizens Police Academy, so we did some video for them. But other than that, that's really about it. If anybody has any questions.
Mr. Doling, everything you put on this schedule that you passed out to us, everything on this schedule is capital
Yes, yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, and just eyeballing this, it would appear to be, and I'd have to really add it up, but just it appears to be, on an average, about $100,000 a year.
I believe so. 102, I think it came out to.
My eyeball is pretty good.
Yeah. Your math is too. Now, of course, like I said, that's not necessarily what we spend. That's just a guesstimate. The finance department, they like their numbers, and so they like to know. And so I put in for a laptop or a computer or, editing software, and then if we need it, we get it, and if we don't, we don't. I've been pretty good about that. I've actually been very good with the budget.
Good. Okay. So, any other questions for Jim? Jim, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there are no other comments or questions from anyone?
I guess I had one question for Joan. Everything on your list is capital as well?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
I will then entertain a motion to adjourn.
Well, we need to appoint our committee.
Yes, we did.
Oh.
You, Joe, and myself.
I might as well stay since we're adjourned.
Conclude. Right. If no one has any other public comment or whatever, well, thank you very much, and we conclude the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone. No, that's all right. Listen, I spent a lot of years in scouting, so